joined once again by the political journalist Alicia Fitzgerald and the former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Claire and Alicia, thanks very much for being with us. Let's start with this one in the Financial Times, and this is across the pond as Donald Trump has targeted James Comey.
Yes, he has. So this is the ex-FBI director who dedicated a lot of time to investigating the links between Russia and Trump's presidential campaign. Basically, Trump has since signalled that he wants to basically beat down more political opponents and people that challenge him after charges were pressed against Comey. And I think this is quite an interesting thing, mainly because obviously Donald Trump sees himself as the champion for free speech. Of course, this isn't a speech issue, but it's along the same vein of people kind of challenging different political opinions. And I think this really signals that big question of whether Trump actually really does champion free speech or whether he just champions free speech that agrees with him and his party. And I think that's the kind of big question here. It's quite a concerning time, I suppose, when people who are challenging political figures and potentially suggesting things that aren't so positive about them, that they could be silenced or reported in this kind of way. So definitely, I think, a story that signals a wider potential wider issue.
So James Comey, of course, has denied the allegations that he faces. I think there are 2 charges. And the thing that's extraordinary about this is Donald Trump kind of put this out on his social media, saying if you don't come after these people, I think the statute of limitations on this was Tuesday, so if they were going to do it, they had to do it pretty soon, and they have.
That's right, and Donald Trump uses his own social media channel first to announce pretty much everything. This is governance by social media, and he doesn't see there's anything wrong with that. And this is a complete turnaround. So it is quite worrying. The weaponisation of the Department of Justice in the United States should be a concern to us all, because whatever happens over in America tends to then follow suit in the United Kingdom. And I don't want to see that kind of abuse with politically appointed judges going after people that have a disagreement with the president of the day and then being hauled into court over it.
As a former political advisor, I mean, you say that he does his politics by social media. You often find that the Prime Minister might be tweeting something out before he's speaking to the Commons. I mean, the Leader of the Opposition doing the same thing. Yeah. Nigel Farage is great on TikTok, I'm told, so...
Apparently so. And this is where the younger market comes into it. I've got a very nearly 17-year-old son who gets all of his news off of the platforms like, TikTok and Snapchat, and that's about it. That's where he gets his news from. And you can understand why politicians want to use it. But when you're the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and you announce your policy outside of the House of Commons, the House of Commons Speaker rightly has a problem with that.
Is never happy when they do that. Right, let's move on to this one on the front of the Telegraph, if we can. And the headline here that the King may have had something to do with Donald Trump's seeming rhetoric shift on support of Ukraine.
This is why we deploy the King for these things. The soft power of the King is underrated in this country. We saw that Donald Trump was loving the state visit that he had at Windsor Great Park and then the state banquet in the evening. And the UK does put on a great show, and the King's speech, I thought, was actually very, very gracious. He mentioned Ukraine, I think, the grand total of once in his speech. But clearly the conversations they had in private have made all the difference, because President Trump's rhetoric around Ukraine has completely done a 180. He was all for President Putin being allowed to take what land he wanted, and we should put up with it. And now that has completely turned the other way. The meeting recently with President Zelensky, I think the 2 men were pretty much in agreement that America will dial down on the Putin support.
Yeah, and just to do a quick Google there to check, the King met Zelensky after the Oval Office fallout, so the King has obviously got some kind of stake in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that there was an awful lot of controversy about the legitimacy of having a second state visit from Trump. But I mean, I think this kind of proves that there was a diplomatic reason to maybe go ahead with it, even if people didn't like it. And clearly, and the one thing I will say, though, is we know that Trump changes his mind so regularly. So as much as I'll say this has made a difference and may have kind of spun the dial in some way, we obviously, you can never be too sure with Donald Trump. I mean, in a week's time, it might be something different. But it seems at the moment this has definitely been a positive step.
And that's why I keep couching in the rhetorical shift, because the one thing he could do is just give Ukraine more weapons to help.
It could help.
All right, let's move on to this on the front of the Daily Mirror, and it's an interview with Prince William.
Yeah, I mean, quite a stark and depressing interview, I suppose, with Prince William. He has said that this past year has been the hardest he's ever had. And as someone who dealt with the loss of their mother at such a young age, I mean, I think it's quite a high bar to top. And this, of course, is relating to the fact that both his wife and his father were battling cancer over the past year, not to mention all of the issues, the ongoing issues rumbling on with his brother. So definitely a really tough year at the best of times, but I can't even imagine how hard it must be being that famous and being in the public eye, having to deal with this. I mean, I think it's really quite interesting as well that he's felt so strongly about it that he's able to actually go to the press and say the emotional side of it. I mean, that's quite rare as well with the royals. They usually kind of keep themselves quite private in this regard. So I think it probably shows just how severe this has been for him. And yeah.
I mean, as you rightly point out, it would have been a high bar to pass the passing of his mother, but he says that it's been the hardest year ever because, I mean, his wife and his father announced they've had cancer. It's just terrible.
And you can't imagine that. He is only 43 years old. And I sometimes think we forget he isn't very old. He's got a young family. He is trying to balance the needs of his wife and his children along with what his duties are as a working royal. I think he works that very, very well. And I think it's nice to see the honesty and a personal aspect to the royals, which we hadn't seen for many years, and it's starting to change. And I do think that Prince William is the person to change around the monarchy for good.
Yeah. I'm just going to skip us on from our next one because it's another royal story. So we've done a bit of a royal roundup. I want to take us back to politics if I can, and we'll go to the, I think perhaps there's the story, still no way back here, it says in The Sun. We'll leave that where it is and see if the family can reconcile. We're going to take you to the front of The Guardian, though, and I want to look ahead to Labour Party conference, which gets underway today, and the issues facing the Prime Minister and the government. I mean, he said in a speech yesterday he's going to fight for the soul of the nation. He might have to do a lot more, I would say, because the polls aren't looking good for him.
They're not looking good, but they haven't been looking good for some time. And I think it's been an upward struggle for Keir Starmer to put across what his message actually is, what he stands for, what his policies are, to not only bring the country behind him, but sometimes his own party, because we've seen quite a split when you're looking at things like welfare reform. That has gone down badly with his own party. And we have seen two MPs, I think it's John McDonnell and Upsana Begum, being readmitted back into
apparently,
the Labour Party. So he's clearly looking to bolster up support there. This is going to be an interesting conference. I think that there are some real battles ahead for Keir Starmer. You've got the election of the deputy leader and that little campaign that's going alongside it, which threatens to derail his whole speech and the whole conference. It's taking away from anything that he could put out there as positive and looking at the internal battles of the Labour Party, which for people like me is absolute gold dust.
It is. I mean, look, is it too much to say it's like a make or break conference moment for him?
I mean, to be honest, I think he'd
15
have
months
to...
in. Let's think about it as well. It's 15 months in.
Well, I mean, firstly, this is going to be starkly different to the past two conferences we had. The last one was pretty fresh off the back of his election, people feeling really positive, hopeful, all of these things. And the one before that, I mean, it was very clear that Labour would probably be the next government. So, again, there was this feeling of hope. Everyone was really just into it, enthusiastic. And I think this time's going to be starkly different. I think the difficulty he has is he wants to, as we've seen over the past few weeks, he wants to show that he recognises reform, he recognises the kind of political temperature of the country, but by doing so, he risks actually just focusing on reform so much that the whole conference just becomes a bit of a gift for Nigel Farage, and I think that's the hard line he's got to tread this time.
But can he avoid doing that? Can he avoid not addressing the reform threat? I mean, Lucy Powell this morning in the papers is saying that they've handed the microphone, the megaphone to Nigel Farage.
I think that you have to be really, really careful. Yes, there are certain issues where reform are very, very strong, and to ignore them, I think, is foolish. But the knee-jerk reaction every single time that either Nigel Farage or Richard Tice opens their mouth is ridiculous. You can't keep governing a country in that way. You can't keep reacting to every single statement. So you need to lay out what you believe in first, and then you take the fight to those people on the doorsteps. That's the only way you're going to get around this.
How tricky has it been for him? He's tried to have a reset. I mean, as Parliament came back...
Which one?
Well, there was the big reset, wasn't it, when Parliament came back, and then he lost Angela Rayner, and then...
Phase 2?
Yeah, right.
And I think, what are we up to now? Phase 3,
Somewhere
4?
there. I've lost
4B?
count. The point is, he's trying to reset himself consistently, and that's why I'm trying not to be hyperbolic talking about it being make or break, but he's got to say something in that speech that gets his people behind him.
Yeah, of course you do. And as a leader, that's all you want. You want your sort of party faithful to come behind you, and you want the rest of the country then to follow suit. Doesn't always work like that, and the Conservative Party know full well that it's very, very difficult. Your speech has to be good, and unfortunately, just falling into the trap of using slogans that don't say anything is not going to work.
Can things be baked in at this stage, do you think? I mean, as I say, it's only 15 months in. Can the opinions of him already be baked in, and no matter, what he says, it may not have the impact? I
think so. I mean, well, you've seen enough of these speeches.
I think that's the risk, really. I think the trouble is people's patience with this government was understandably quite short, and that is because people were already feeling so angry about the political climate of the country prior to Labour entering government, that their kind of period for success and winning the public's trust was really, really short. We're only over a year since they entered office, and it felt like everyone had written them off quite early on during that stage. But you also have to kind of empathise with the public in that front. I mean, when you've had years and years of issues not being resolved and people are losing their patience, I think sadly that is just the reality, and there is definitely the risk that Keir Starmer maybe has missed that window.
OK. Last thought on this, Claire, from you as Conservative advisor. There's all this talk about the King of the North, Prince across the water, Andy Burnham. How much impact can it have changing your leader at this point? I mean, the Conservatives know a bit about that.
They do. It's never a good look to start changing your leader.
Just not.
It's just not. Just don't do this.
Stick with it.
Stick with it. Carry on.
I think especially given how many Conservative Party leaders we had over the past kind of 5 years, I think people just think not another leadership competition. It just signals a bit of chaos, really.
All right, guys, thanks for that really good talk and enjoyed your company this morning. Thank you very much for being with us, Claire and Lisa. Thanks so much for that. All right, well, do stay with us, of course. We'll have all of the top stories after this short break, where we will look ahead, of course, to the Labour Party conference, which begins in Liverpool as education unions all come out to demand that the government scrap the two-child benefit cap. Speaking to Josh McAllister earlier, the Minister for Families, he said it's not something that they're minded to do at the moment, but they do want to reduce child poverty.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories